Welcome Ghosts back to Bullet Catcher Gaming. Happy 2024. This is our first proper video of 2024. We're chucking up some shorts every now and again just for something to look at. Been working hard on a new series of videos. This is the first one and it's all about Nomad and some of the things that you may not know about Nomad, or some of the things that weren't necessarily covered within the main games. Big shout out to Sandylands, who has helped me hugely put these videos together, come up with some of the info. Absolute legend in the community. Thank you so much to all of you for subscribing and supporting us. We haven't been doing as many videos as we'd like over the last year or so. I'm really hoping that this year that is going to change. I've got loads of videos in the works, and hopefully, judging on feedback, we'll see how these go. Now, as you can see by the thumbnail, this is all about Nomad. Now, what I didn't want to do is go into too much detail about the actual games themselves, so like Wildlands, Breakpoint, etc. Because I'm presuming if you've clicked on this, well, you've already kind of played the games and you know the missions and things like that. So I wanted to kind of concentrate more on the things that maybe you didn't know, some of that type of info. So we've got a Discord, link is in the description below. But let's get going. Let's hit this. So Nomad, real name, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Perryman, obviously call sign Nomad. So he was born on May 30th in 1980 in Boston, Massachusetts, in the US of A. Obviously, he is the Ghost Team leader, or the Ghost Team leader that we know of anyway. He's a support weapon specialist within GST. He spent most of his youth moving from kind of base to base. Bit of an army brat, some may say. But his specific expertise is in psychological and unconventional warfare. Perfect fit for a ghost. So I'm going to go through some real basics over his kind of the years that he was in service. And then we're going to go through afterwards some stuff that you may not know that is canon that, like I said, wasn't really covered within the games. 1998, applies to West Point Military Academy, and 4 years later, in 2002, he graduated from that academy. In 2002, he joined the 1st Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, after completing his Airborne and Ranger School. Following year, he got promoted in 2003 to 1st Lieutenant. 3 years later, he applied for selection for the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, also known, of course, as Delta Force. Same year, he passed that selection. He was assigned to B Squadron within Delta. Same year, well, from that year to 2009, he completed 3 deployments with Task Force 88. So that is a joint US, UK and Australian Special Forces team, and they operated in Iraq. Personally, would love to see a Nomad game based around that kind of time. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with that? Not agree with that? I think that would be an excellent game. So 2010, promoted to the rank of captain. 4 years later, during a Mexican rebellion, which I will come on to in a bit more detail later, he was rescued during that rebellion by Captain Salvatore and Staff Sergeant Hume. So whilst he was being helped in his escape, he actually saved Hume's life in that firefight and was then recruited by Salvatore and Hume during that same Mexican Civil War, where they wanted him to join the Ghosts. I'll go into a bit more detail in that afterwards. So 2014, he was loaded on to that Special Forces qualification course. And in 2015, he passed the Special Forces qualification course and is assigned to the now renamed Group for Specialized Tactics. In 2017, he was on a mission in Ukraine where 2 ghosts, Sage and Joker, were injured, and then he basically became team leader. I'll go into that afterwards too. 2019, promoted to the rank of Major. Also in the same year, he formed Kingslayer. That was during an operation in South America on the Colombian, Brazilian and Venezuelan border. Later on that year, obviously being the leader of Kingslayer, during the events of Operation Kingslayer and Fallen Lord, which we know all about. 2020 was the leader of Kingslayer team during a joint operation with the CIA, the NSA, and 4th Echelon in Burkina Faso. The same year, he went rogue. So he teamed with 4th Echelon operator Sarah Fisher to rescue Sam Fisher from North Korea before being sent home by Karen Bowman. 2022, deployed in Afghanistan with Lieutenant Colonel Walker and Hill. Of course, we know both of those characters very well. 2023, promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. And then 2025 was officer commanding the 32 Ghosts deployed on Operation Greenstone in November of 2025. Obviously, Breakpoint, we know all about that. 2026 was redeployed to Aroa as part of Operation Motherland, working with CIA case officer Karen Bowman again. Motherland, really good DLC. Wish you'd have had more stuff like that. 2026, Nomad retires from active service. So, that's kind of an overview of what he has done. So, let's go through it in a little bit more detail about some of the things that you might not know about. So, 2013, his unit was caught up in the Mexican rebellion, as I mentioned earlier, and he found himself alongside Ghost operators Staff Sergeant John Hume and Captain Nick Salvatore. Now, I said he saved Hume's life. He actually did this by engaging an armoured vehicle single-handedly. That's when they decided that he would be perfect to be a Ghost. Now, obviously, after he was recruited, he was assigned to a squad with Sage and Joker, who I mentioned earlier, but also Weaver, which obviously we know all about Weaver, and we will be covering some more of these characters in later videos, so keep an eye out for them if you want to know more about some of these other people. So during a mission in 2017 that went completely wrong, that was in Donetsk, Ukraine, where they were actually ambushed by Bodark. That is where Sage and Joker got injured, and they went back to Germany, to the military hospital there, where they bumped into Mitchell. We'll be doing a video on Mitchell. He called Nomad into his office and told him that he was being moved to Ghost lead of his own team. Now, that included Weaver, Holt, and Midas. Obviously, we know all about these guys, and like I said, we will cover them more as we go along. But actually, Nomad was really displeased with this because they hadn't followed protocol in the way that they'd put this team together, which sounds a bit nomad-y. So their first mission was to retrieve or destroy a downed UAV in South America. They also had to rescue some archaeologists and a research team from militants who were holding them as hostage. So during the events of that mission, Nomad ended up being captured himself, and he was tactically interrogated by the enemy forces until his own team mounted a rescue operation. So it was during that time, interestingly enough, that Nomad came in contact with El Pulpo. You might recognize that name, the head of transport for the Santa Blanca cartel. Now, it was this meeting that prompted Karen to approach Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell to eventually create a joint GST-CIA operation in the near future to tackle a narco drug state. Obviously, Ghost Recon Wildlands. So, sometime during 2021, Nomad and the rest of the Kingslayer team again worked with Bowman and 4th Echelon. They assisted Sam Fisher in an operation inside Burkina Faso to rescue NGO hostages and they discovered a weapon of mass destruction, a nerve gas codenamed Red Wolf. So Kingslayer had successfully exfilled hostages back to the RV. Fisher had provided cover. They destroyed all the bunkers by using a modified bomb from an MQ-20 Avenger drone. But shortly afterwards, Nomad joined an extracurricular operation, finding Fisher, who had been betrayed and captured in a force flag operation in North Korea. And he was joined by fellow 4th Echelon agent Fisher's daughter, Sarah Fisher. So Nomad arranged that they would depart on a freight from the airport. He had 3 other guys with him. Right before they boarded, the Splinter Cell agent Isaac Briggs incapacitated the 3 associates, confronted the pair, although Fisher had spoken to director Anna Grimsdottir, who allowed them 72 hours before being disavowed, so at a short time period. They arrived in Seoul first, South Korea, took possession of a car that Nomad's contact had left for them, quickly picked up on the trail of the Dragon's criminal gang, who was watching for their entry because they'd been tipped off by the coup planners. And then Nomad and Fisher turned the tables on their ambushers, split up. Fisher made it to the next steps, but Nomad was pursued by more of the gang, eventually seeking refuge in the US Embassy, where Bowman found out he was there and ordered him to come home immediately. But Sam Fisher was saved by his daughter. So obviously some of these little bits that we've covered, and some of them you might know little pieces of. So February 22nd, 2022, it was Afghanistan, Operation Blind Prophets. Nomad, Walker and some other ghosts were deployed in the Middle East, running counter-terrorism operations. This would be the first time Nomad and Walker had worked together since Operation Oracle. Remember Operation Oracle, a really good kind of little add-on mission that closed out Wildlands. Really enjoyed that one. Strangely enough, though, Walker seems to forget about this mission during the cutscenes in Breakpoint, which is kind of odd. And what I have noticed is, Sandy as well, we've both noticed that there are quite a few continuity errors within Ubisoft's own canon for this game. And I'll probably get into a few of them later on in another video. Maybe go into a bit more detail about where some of these things don't quite add up. The team were also deployed to Sudan. They tracked a fearsome Sudanese warlord, but are then ambushed and captured. They seem to like being captured a lot, with Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell sending a second team to find and rescue them. But their trust in Mitchell was tested when they find out the true identity of the terrorists' true identity, which I've already said, which is Red Wolf, which goes straight back to that name that we mentioned earlier, his origins and his ties to the ghosts. Now, during the events of this tour, Nomad would witness Walker snap and execute Lieutenant Vaughn after the lieutenant tried to shoot Walker in the back. Nomad would later be called as a witness during Walker's court-martial. So there was a few little bits and bobs there just to kind of fill in a bit more of what happened to Nomad during the kind of before, middle and after of Wildlands. Some of those things would make a superb game, especially that 3-year period, I think, or 3 or 4 year period. I would really be interested in that I talked about earlier. I think that would be superb. I would love to see Nomad, though some of you may argue that we've had enough of Nomad and maybe you don't want to see him anymore. You'd like to see new characters in the new game, and I do understand that also. I like Nomad, but I like the Wildlands Nomad. I like the quick wit as opposed to the kind of, I don't know, blunt Nomad, or a mixture of the two would be nice. But a little bit of trivia on Nomad to finish us off. He doesn't trust the CIA, though seems to get on very well with Karen Bowman. And he's actually been tipped as a future 4th echelon operator after working multiple missions with Sam Fisher. I wonder how any of you would feel if you suddenly saw, you know, Sam Fisher in a future game, if they ever make one, and, you know, seeing Nomad turn up in it or something as a new echelon operator. I wonder what you think about that. I'm not sure. I mean, it could be interesting, could be a way to retire him out of Ghost Recon and then still keep that character alive. It could work. He was also in, obviously, as I said earlier, he was involved in Walker's court martial. Now, he speaks fluent Spanish, but he thinks his own accent, Spanish accent, is poor. So he is an expert as well in communications. He was also an old teammate of Carl Buchart, so he served with him in the 75th Ranger Regiment. Now, one of the things about his family is that he absolutely hates keeping his job a secret from his family. Obviously, there's reasons that he can't tell them, but he hates it. He's been married twice now, and he has 3 children. He has 1 son and 2 daughters, both of who are now at university. He has a strained relationship, though, with his son, who now regards him as an absentee father. He's about to become a grandfather during the events of Operation Greenstone. Pretty young grandfather, to be fair, and has trouble adjusting to mundane day-to-day life when he's not deployed. So there you go, little bits of tidbits of information there. I didn't go into too much about Wildlands and Breakpoint for obvious reasons, because you've played them and you probably know them already. But if you want me to go into more detail about them, I always could in another video. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Loads more videos this year, that's a promise. More podcasts, etc. Take care, and we will see you again on the next one. Bye-bye.